Have you ever felt a shift, not in what she says, but in what you feel when you're next to her? Have you ever laid beside your wife, and for a moment, something felt unfamiliar, even though nothing was said out loud? And what does it really mean when the closest moments between you start to feel distant? Most men ignore it, not because they don't see it, but because they don't want to believe it. Because accepting that something has changed forces you to question everything. But here's the truth. A woman's body speaks long before her words ever do, and when her emotions begin to move away from you, her behavior follows, quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. The problem is, these signs don't come with warnings. They don't announce themselves. They appear in moments where you expect connection the most, and if you're not aware, you'll miss them completely. Or worse, you'll explain them away until it's too late. Think about this for a moment. When was the last time you felt fully connected to her, without doubt? When was the last time her presence felt warm, natural, effortless? Because distance doesn't appear overnight. It builds, silently, gradually, until one day you feel it and you can't ignore it anymore. And the most dangerous part? By the time most men recognize it, the emotional shift has already happened. Now here's where it begins. One of the quietest yet most revealing changes is something so small that most men overlook it completely. Eye contact. Have you ever noticed her avoiding your eyes in moments where she used to look at you the most? Not all the time, not in a way that feels obvious, but enough to feel different. She looks away. She closes her eyes more than usual, or she simply avoids holding your gaze for longer than a second. Now ask yourself, why would someone avoid eye contact in moments that are supposed to be intimate? Because eyes reveal truth. They expose emotion. They show presence or the absence of it. And when a woman is emotionally connected to you, eye contact happens naturally. It's not forced. It's not avoided. It's instinctive. But when something changes inside her, that instinct disappears, and what replaces it is avoidance. Not always consciously, but consistently enough to mean something. Because looking into your eyes requires emotional presence, and if her mind, her feelings are somewhere else, holding that connection becomes difficult, uncomfortable, even overwhelming. So she disconnects, visually, emotionally, quietly. And most men don't question it. They assume she's tired, distracted, not in the mood. But the truth is often deeper than that. Because when eye contact fades, it's rarely just physical. It's emotional distance finding its way into behavior. Now here's where it becomes even more clear. After the moment passes, what happens next? Does she stay close? Does she naturally seek comfort, warmth, connection? Or does something feel off? Have you ever noticed her pulling away immediately after, turning her back, getting up quickly, avoiding any form of closeness? No conversation, no softness, just distance. This is one of the most misunderstood signals, because many men think maybe she just needs space. But the reality is, when a woman feels emotionally connected, she doesn't rush away from closeness. She lingers in it. She enjoys it. She extends it, because connection doesn't end in the moment. It continues after, through presence, through touch, through shared silence. But when that disappears, when she withdraws instead of staying, it's not random. It's intentional, even if she's not fully aware of it. Because staying close requires emotional openness, and if that openness is no longer there, distance becomes the easier choice. Now ask yourself, is this a one-time behavior, or is it becoming a pattern? Because patterns reveal truth, and the more consistent the distance becomes, the less it can be explained away. Now let's go deeper, because sometimes the shift isn't in distance, it's in performance. Have you ever felt like her reactions suddenly became exaggerated, too expressive, too loud, too forced, almost like something is being acted out rather than felt? At first, it might confuse you, because it looks like effort, like she's trying, like she's more engaged than before, but something doesn't feel real. Something feels disconnected. Because real connection doesn't need to be performed. It flows, naturally, without exaggeration, without effort to convince. But when something is missing internally, people often try to compensate externally. And that's where performance appears. Not to connect, but to distract, to shift your focus away from what's not there. And what's not there is presence. Now, this is where emotional awareness becomes critical. Because if you only look at what's visible, you'll believe everything is fine. But if you feel what's underneath, you'll notice the difference immediately. Because authenticity has a certain calmness to it, and performance always carries tension. Now here's something even more subtle, something that doesn't happen often, but when it does, it means everything. Have you ever noticed a sudden change in what she wants without any conversation? Not gradual, not natural, but sudden, unexpected, almost like it came from somewhere else. Now ask yourself, where does sudden change come from without communication? Because growth takes time. Exploration is shared. But abrupt shifts without explanation often come from external influence, something new, something introduced outside of what you've built together. And when that happens, the connection you once had starts to feel unfamiliar, not because you changed, but because something else did. Now here's where most men get it wrong. They either ignore it, or they become reactive. They question, they confront, they lose control. But a man who is grounded does something different. He observes, he pays attention. He doesn't jump to conclusions, but he doesn't ignore patterns either. Because emotional intelligence is not about reacting quickly. It's about understanding deeply. Now take a moment and reflect. Are you seeing isolated moments or a consistent shift? Because one moment means nothing, but repeated behavior always tells a story. And the man who understands that doesn't need explanations. He reads the reality as it is, not as he wishes it to be. And that awareness is where everything begins.
Have you ever noticed how sometimes it's not what she does, but when she does it that feels different? Have you ever felt that her closeness doesn't come naturally anymore, but appears at very specific moments, almost like it has a purpose? And why is it that just when you begin to question things, she suddenly becomes more attentive, more present, more available? At first, it feels reassuring, like maybe you were overthinking, like maybe everything is still fine. But then it fades again, and you're left with a question that's hard to ignore. Why does her warmth only appear when something feels off? This is where things become psychological, because not all affection comes from love. Sometimes it comes from strategy. And this is one of the most difficult realities for a man to accept, because it means what you're experiencing might not be genuine connection, but controlled behavior. Now think about this carefully. When a woman is emotionally invested in you, her desire to be close is consistent. It's not calculated. It doesn't appear only when needed. It flows naturally, without conditions. But when something shifts inside her, that consistency disappears, and what replaces it is timing. She becomes close when it benefits her, when it calms the situation, when it redirects your attention, and then, just as quickly, she returns to distance. Now ask yourself, have you ever experienced this pattern? Moments of coldness followed by sudden warmth, moments of distance followed by unexpected closeness, and each time it happens right when you start noticing something isn't right. This is not coincidence. This is emotional management. Because when someone feels guilt or pressure or fear of being discovered, they don't always confess. They compensate. They create moments that make you question your own perception. They give just enough to reset your doubts. And this is where many men get trapped, because they focus on the moment of warmth and ignore the pattern of inconsistency. But patterns always reveal the truth, not isolated actions. Now here's where it becomes even more subtle. Have you ever noticed her becoming suddenly more available, but only in certain situations? Not consistently, not naturally, but in moments where it feels like she's trying to fix something. Maybe after tension, maybe after you question something, maybe after she senses your distance. She becomes softer, more engaged, more present, and for a moment, everything feels normal again. But then it disappears, and you're back to where you started. Now ask yourself, why does connection only appear when there's a problem? Because real connection doesn't wait for problems to exist. It exists regardless. But controlled connection appears when needed and disappears when it's no longer required. This is not emotional flow. This is emotional calculation. Now here's where Stoic awareness becomes critical, because a reactive man gets pulled into the cycle. He feels relief when she becomes close. He ignores the distance that comes after. He lives moment to moment instead of seeing the pattern. But a grounded man steps back. He observes. He doesn't get lost in temporary warmth. He looks at consistency. He looks at behavior over time, because he understands something powerful. Truth is not in what happens once. Truth is in what repeats. Now let's go even deeper, because sometimes the most revealing sign is not what she does, but what she stops doing. Have you ever noticed that things she used to do naturally are now completely gone? Not reduced, not changed, but gone. The small gestures, the spontaneous affection, the effortless connection, now replaced by silence or routine or nothing at all. And the most confusing part, she doesn't explain it, she doesn't address it, it just disappears. Now ask yourself, why would something natural vanish without a reason? Because natural behavior comes from genuine feeling, and when that feeling shifts, the behavior follows, not gradually, but sometimes abruptly. And when you try to bring it back, it feels forced, unnatural, like something that doesn't belong anymore. Now this is where clarity becomes uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't ignore it. You can't pretend it's the same. You can't convince yourself everything is fine. Because deep down, you already feel the difference. And that feeling is your awareness trying to show you the truth. Now the question becomes, will you listen to it, or will you keep explaining it away until there's nothing left to question? Because the longer you ignore patterns, the clearer they become. And by the time they are undeniable, the distance is no longer subtle. It's complete. So take a moment, step back from emotion, from hope, from assumption, and look at what's actually happening. Not what you want it to be, not what it used to be, but what it is right now. Because the man who sees reality clearly is the only one who has the power to respond to it correctly.
Have you ever reached a point where you're no longer confused, just quiet? Where the questions stop, not because you found answers, but because something inside you already knows. And what does it really mean when you're lying next to someone who used to feel like home, but now feels distant, even in silence? This is where everything becomes clear. Not through words, not through explanations, but through presence or the absence of it. Because the deepest truth in any relationship is not what is said, it's what is felt. And when that feeling changes, no amount of conversation can fully hide it. Now here's the hardest part to accept. A woman doesn't disconnect from you in a single moment. She disconnects in layers. First emotionally, then mentally, and only at the end, physically. So by the time you notice it physically, the deeper separation has already happened. And that's why it feels so sudden to you, because you're seeing the final stage, not the beginning. Now think about this carefully. Have you ever felt like you're there, but not really with her? Like your presence no longer creates a reaction, no pull, no warmth, no spark, just existence, side by side, but worlds apart. This is not just distance, this is detachment.
And detachment is never random. It always has a direction. Because when emotional energy leaves one place, it doesn't disappear. It moves. And the truth most men avoid asking is, where did it go? Now here's where everything becomes brutally honest. Have you ever felt like you're no longer desired, but tolerated? Not rejected, not pushed away, but simply there. Like your role has shifted from being wanted to being accepted. And there's a silence in that realization that's hard to explain, because it doesn't come with conflict, it comes with emptiness. And emptiness is far more dangerous than arguments, because arguments mean something still exists, but emptiness means something is gone. Now here's something even deeper, and this is where many men finally start seeing the truth. Have you ever felt alone while being with her? Not physically alone, but emotionally. Like no matter how close you are, there's no connection reaching you, no energy coming back, just a void. This is the most painful signal of all, because it cannot be faked, it cannot be misunderstood, it cannot be explained away. When someone is physically present but emotionally absent, you feel it immediately. And your mind may try to deny it, but your body doesn't. Now here's where Stoic clarity becomes essential. Because a weak man runs from this realization. He distracts himself, he denies it, he blames circumstances. But a grounded man faces it, not emotionally, not impulsively, but with awareness. Because truth doesn't become less true by ignoring it. Now ask yourself, are you reacting to isolated moments, or are you finally seeing the pattern? Because everything you've noticed, the lack of eye contact, the emotional distance, the inconsistency, the absence of initiation, the forced behavior, the selective closeness, the silence, the emptiness, they are not separate issues. They are pieces of one reality, a reality where the connection is no longer what it used to be. Now this doesn't mean you jump to conclusions, it doesn't mean you accuse, it doesn't mean you lose control. Because reaction without clarity destroys everything. But awareness gives you power. The power to observe without panic, to think without emotional chaos, to respond instead of react. Now here's something most men never understand. You don't regain control by chasing answers. You regain control by becoming centered. Because when you are centered, you don't depend on her behavior to define your reality. You see it, you understand it, but you don't lose yourself in it. And that's where strength is built. Not in confrontation, not in forcing truth, but in standing firm within yourself. Now let's go even deeper, because the real danger is not just what she's doing, it's what you start doing in response. Have you become more anxious, more observant but in a restless way, more reactive to every small change? Because once doubt enters your mind, it starts shaping your behavior. And if you're not careful, you lose your stability, you lose your presence, you lose the very thing that made you strong in the first place. And this is where everything collapses, not because of her actions alone, but because you abandoned your center. Now understand this clearly. You cannot control what someone else feels. You cannot force connection. You cannot rebuild something by ignoring its reality. But you can control one thing: yourself, your awareness, your response, your direction. And that is where your power lies. Now take a moment and ask yourself the question most men are afraid to face. Am I seeing the truth or avoiding it? Because deep down, you already know, not through logic, but through feeling. And that feeling is not your enemy, it's your signal. Now here's the final truth. Silence reveals more than words ever will. Distance reveals more than explanations. And absence reveals everything. So don't look for answers in what she says. Look at what remains when everything is quiet, because that's where reality lives. And the man who learns to see that reality clearly is the one who never has to wonder again. Not because nothing ever changes, but because he understands it the moment it does. And that understanding is what separates confusion from clarity, weakness from control, and blindness from awareness.